I met Ella in college, both of us full of ambition and caffeine-fueled dreams. She was a journalism major with a knack for storytelling, and I was a software developer who preferred binary over banter. Our paths crossed in a photography club, me, trying to get better at capturing moments, and her, the natural subject who brought photos to life. By the time we graduated, we were inseparable. She moved into my tiny apartment a month after I proposed, and we got married the following summer in a modest ceremony surrounded by fairy lights and our closest friends. In the 5 years that followed, our lives took on a comfortable rhythm. I worked at a startup that demanded long hours, while Ella found her passion in freelance photography, capturing everything from weddings to street scenes. Our love life, though not as passionate as it had been, was warm and familiar, and I figured that was normal after half a decade together. I'd hear stories from colleagues about how marriage dulled the spark, and I dismissed my own nagging doubts as just part of that process. Then came her contract with Exposure, a local magazine with a reputation for bold and provocative work. Ella was ecstatic. It was her chance to break out, to get her name on the map. The job meant more late nights editing photos and weekends spent on location shoots. I tried to be supportive, bringing her coffee when she pulled all-nighters, listening when she vented about picky editors or stubborn lighting. I even tried to ignore the pang of jealousy I felt when she mentioned Marcus. Marcus Leary was a well-known photographer with a flair for capturing the raw and the intimate. Ella had mentioned him before, the genius behind a series of candid portraits that had gone viral the previous year. When he reached out to collaborate, it was like a dream come true for her. For me, it was a slow burn anxiety that started in my chest and spread every time his name slipped into conversation. At first, it was little things. Ella started wearing new clothes, edgier, more revealing than her usual jeans and tees. She'd laugh about how Marcus insisted that confidence was part of the image. Her texts would light up late at night, and her smiles at the screen were a shade too bright. But she'd always say the same thing when I asked, "We're just colleagues, babe." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. That's why, when she mentioned a weekend shoot at a lakeside cabin, totally last minute, Marcus's idea, I can't turn it down, I helped her pack. I smiled, kissed her goodbye, and ignored the voice in my head that screamed something was wrong. 2 days stretched into 3, then 4. Her replies to my texts were curt, and her voice over the phone was tight. When she finally came home, she was different. Her eyes wouldn't quite meet mine, and she flinched when I pulled her into my arms. That night, when she fell asleep beside me, I couldn't resist. I slid her phone from the nightstand, palms damp with guilt and fear. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was doing it to ease my mind. But the messages were there, a neatly laid trail of betrayals, photos of her in lingerie I'd never seen, texts filled with winking emojis and inside jokes I didn't understand. And then there was the one that made my hands shake. "Last weekend was incredible. I can still feel you." It was from Marcus. I stared at the words until they blurred, hoping they'd somehow rearrange themselves into something innocent. But they didn't. I put the phone back, crawled out of bed, and locked myself in the bathroom. I sat on the edge of the tub, hands clutching my hair, trying to keep from vomiting. The woman I'd built my world around, the one who had promised me forever, had burned it all to the ground with a flash of a camera and a weekend away. I didn't sleep that night. Didn't confront her, either. Part of me was still clinging to some pathetic hope that there was an explanation. That I'd misread, misunderstood. But deep down, I knew better. The only question left was what I was going to do about it. The morning after I found the messages, I felt like I was moving through someone else's life. I went through the motions, showered, dressed, made coffee, all while Ella slept soundly in our bed, oblivious to the chaos in my head. I couldn't bring myself to look at her, let alone wake her up. I left for work early, the coffee untouched on the counter and my stomach twisting with nausea. At the office, I spent the day staring blankly at lines of code that blurred together. My co-workers' voices drifted past, muffled and distant, and when one of them asked if I was okay, I lied. Said I hadn't slept well. They chuckled and made jokes about married life, and I forced a smile that cracked at the edges. It wasn't until lunch that I found myself pulling out my phone, scrolling through Ella's Instagram. I'd never really paid much attention to it before. Most of her posts were harmless pictures of sunsets, city streets, cups of coffee. But recently, there were more of her, 2 selfies in front of mirrors, her lips parted just enough, her eyes darker, more intense. And the comments were full of fire emojis and heart eyes, most of them from guys I didn't recognize. Including Marcus. I tapped his profile, a mix of sultry portraits and artsy landscapes. There were a few shots of Ella mixed in, nothing too provocative, at least not to the untrained eye. But knowing what I knew, every look, every smile seemed laced with secrets. I scrolled further back until I found the photos from the lakeside shoot. Ella in a white dress, sheer enough to hint at everything beneath. Her eyes half-lidded, lips parted, water lapping at her legs. The caption read, "Lost in the moment." The comments were worse. "Stunning work. Your best yet. Lucky bastard." I turned off my phone and stared at the screensaver. Ella and I on our wedding day, her smile wide and eyes bright. It felt like a photo of strangers. That night, I barely made it through dinner. Ella was chipper, going on about the magazine spread and how Marcus thought it might be a cover feature. Her eyes sparkled, cheeks flushed, and I couldn't help but wonder if she'd look like that when she was with him. If she'd smiled that same way when he touched her. "Babe," she said, fork paused halfway to her mouth. "You're quiet. Everything okay?" I forced a smile, the lie bitter on my tongue. "Yeah, just tired. Work's been hell." She laughed, reached across the table to squeeze my hand, and I fought not to flinch. Her thumb traced slow circles over my knuckles, and I stared at the gold band on her finger, the one I'd put there with a vow that clearly meant more to me than it did to her. That night, after she fell asleep, I found myself opening her laptop. I knew her password, our wedding date, of course, and it took less than a minute to find the photos. Hundreds of them. Unedited shots from the weekend, some that made it to Instagram and some that never would. There was Ella in lace and silk, biting her lip, eyes hooded. Ella on the bed in that goddamn cabin, sprawled on her back, dress slipping off one shoulder. But it was the ones of her and Marcus that gutted me, the two of them laughing, his hand low on her back, her leaning into him like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like she belonged there. I shut the laptop so hard the sound echoed, sharp and damning in the quiet of our bedroom. My breath came fast, ragged, and I clenched my fists until my nails bit into my palms, the pain barely enough to keep me from shattering. I needed proof. I needed to know just how deep this betrayal ran. Because some masochistic part of me, some desperate, broken part, still clung to the idea that maybe I'd misread everything. That maybe it wasn't what it looked like. So the next morning, while Ella was in the shower, I planted an app on her phone. A keylogger to record her texts, a tracker to see where she went. I hated myself for it, for stooping this low, but I needed the truth, no matter how much it hurt. And it hurt like hell. Over the next few days, I watched their messages in real time, sickly sweet texts that blurred the line between professional and personal, late-night exchanges full of winks and innuendo. "Can't stop thinking about you. Last night was amazing. When can I see you again?" I threw up more than once, hunched over the toilet with my stomach clenched and bile burning my throat. The betrayal was a living thing, coiling in my chest, squeezing until I could barely breathe. And then, on Friday, she told me she had another shoot, an overnight gig, nothing major, just a few portraits for an upcoming article. She smiled that bright, practiced smile, kissed me on the cheek, and promised to call. I stood at the window and watched her drive away, my hands shaking. Then I picked up my keys, got in my car, and followed. It wasn't hard. She took the highway out of the city, drove west for 40 minutes, pulled into a hotel parking lot. I watched her step out, smooth her dress, and check her reflection in the window. Watched Marcus appear, grinning like the smug bastard he was, watched him put his hand on her waist and guide her inside. I sat there for an hour, hands white-knuckled on the wheel, trying to decide if I should go in after them or drive straight into a wall. In the end, I did neither. I drove home, went to the bedroom, and ripped every framed photo of us off the walls. Glass shattered, splinters skittered across the floor, and I let them fall, uncaring. Then I opened the closet, pulled down her dresses one by one, and buried my face in them, trying to find some trace of her that hadn't been tainted by him. But all I could smell was his cologne. I sank to the floor, head in my hands, and for the first time in years, I cried. By the time Ella came home the next morning, I'd already made my decision. I hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, hadn't done anything but sit in the dark, gripping the phone that had delivered each damning notification. The house was cold and silent, photos strewn in broken frames across the carpet, her dresses pooled at the bottom of the closet like wilted flowers. When the door creaked open, I didn't move. Just stared at the hallway, numb, waiting. Her heels clicked softly against the hardwood, the sound slow and hesitant, and then she was in the doorway, eyes wide and mouth parting in shock. "Oh my God," she breathed, eyes darting from the shattered frames to the heap of clothes, then to me, slumped on the bed with eyes rimmed red and fists clenched so hard my knuckles were white. What happened?" I held up her phone. Watched her face drain of color when she recognized it, when she realized what it meant. "Where were you?" I asked, voice flat. She swallowed hard, fingers twisting in the hem of her dress. I told you. A shoot. It ran late and Don't, I snapped, the word sharp enough to cut. Just don't. Her mouth closed with a soft click, eyes glistening. She took a step forward, but I flinched, and she stopped short, the hurt flashing across her face almost enough to make me hate myself. Almost. How long? I asked, each word dragged out between clenched teeth. How long has this been going on? She opened her mouth, shut it, then swallowed again, throat working. How long? A few months, she whispered, voice so small I barely heard it. Since the fundraiser shoot in April. I didn't, her voice cracked, and she pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. I didn't mean for it to happen, I swear. It just happened? I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that scraped my throat raw. You accidentally tripped and fell into his bed? That it? Her eyes flashed with anger, cheeks blotching red. You weren't there, she shot back, voice rising. You were always at work, always late, always tired. I tried to talk to you, but you were never around. I was lonely, and he listened. Don't, I ground out. Don't you dare blame this on me. I'm not, she insisted, voice breaking. God, I know I fucked up. I know. But you shut me out, Alex. You stopped trying. You stopped trying? I barked a laugh, running a hand down my face. I worked my ass off to give you everything, Ella. This house, your camera, every goddamn thing you asked for. So don't tell me I stopped trying just because I wasn't here to hold your hand every second of the day. Her lip trembled, eyes glassy. For a second, she looked like she might argue, but then her shoulders slumped and she sank onto the edge of the bed, face buried in her hands. I'm sorry, she whispered, voice muffled. God, I'm so sorry. It was a mistake. I love you. I still love you. My throat burned, the words like acid in my mouth. You don't do this to someone you love. Her shoulders shook, soft, broken sobs that would have shredded me a week ago. Now, all I felt was a hollow ache, a pit in my stomach that stretched wide and bottomless. I'll end it, she gasped, head snapping up. I swear, Alex. I'll call him right now, tell him it's over. Please, just give me a chance to fix this. I stared at her, this woman I'd built my life around, who'd worn white lace and whispered vows beneath summer sunlight, who'd kissed me slow and sweet and promised forever. And all I could see was her in that cabin with him, her lips on his, her hands fisted in his shirt. I need you to leave, I said, voice dull. She blinked, stunned. What? I need you to leave, I repeated, each word like broken glass. Pack a bag and go. I can't, my voice cracked, and I squeezed my eyes shut, chest tight. I can't look at you right now. Alex, please. Go. Her face crumpled, but she stood on shaking legs, dragging a duffel from the closet and filling it with clothes. I stared at the wall, jaw clenched so hard my teeth ached, listening to her soft sniffles, the rustle of fabric, the zip of the bag. When she finally moved to the door, she hesitated, one hand on the frame. I'll call, she stammered. In a few days. To talk. The words died in her throat when I looked up, something in my eyes making her flinch. Then she turned and fled, the door slamming behind her, the house collapsing into silence. I stayed like that for hours, the light shifting from bright to dusky gray, the shadows stretching long and empty. Her perfume lingered, sweet and cloying, and I wanted to tear the sheets from the bed, to burn every trace of her from this house. Instead, I reached for my phone. One call to a lawyer I'd met at a networking event last year. One Google search for the best divorce attorneys in the city. I barely heard the words retainers, fault-based claims, asset division, just nodded and numbly agreed to meet in person. When I finally hung up, my hands were trembling, but the numbness was already setting in, wrapping around my heart and squeezing tight. If Ella wanted to burn our life to the ground, then I'd hand her the matches myself. The first few days without Ella were a blur. I moved through the house like a ghost, tripping over memories everywhere I turned, her favorite mug in the cabinet, her perfume on the bathroom counter, the faded Polaroid stuck to the fridge from our first anniversary. I couldn't bring myself to throw anything out, but I couldn't look at it either. Instead, I closed the door to our bedroom, spread a blanket on the couch, and fell into a fitful sleep that left me more exhausted than before. The lawyer I'd called, Peter Whitaker, was a no-nonsense type, sharp-eyed and fast-talking. His office smelled like old paper and stale coffee, and his walls were lined with diplomas and commendations, the frames polished to a mirror shine. I'd shown up with a manila folder full of evidence, screenshots of texts, photos from the tracker app, timestamps that detailed every betrayal in excruciating detail. Peter's lips thinned as he flipped through the pages, one eyebrow inching higher with every salacious message. Infidelity, he said at last, dropping the papers back into the folder. Clear cut. Given the state's laws, this gives us leverage, property division, alimony, you name it. Are you looking to settle quickly or draw this out? I stared at the folder on his desk, at the grain of the mahogany and the way the light glinted off the silver pen by his hand. I should have been furious. I should have wanted to drag this through court for months, make Ella pay for every lie she'd told, every kiss she'd stolen. But all I felt was bone-deep exhaustion, a weariness that had soaked into my marrow and made my limbs heavy. Quick, I said, voice rough. I want it over. Peter nodded, flipping open a leather-bound notebook. We can file this week. She'll be served within a few days. If she doesn't contest, you could be legally single in 6 months, give or take. Single. The word left a bitter taste in my mouth. Peter paused, pen poised above the paper. You're sure about this? I hesitated, the word no forming on my tongue before I swallowed it back down. Was I sure? How could I be? Part of me still wanted to believe this was all a nightmare I could wake up from, that Ella would walk through the door with tearful apologies and promises to fix everything. But I'd seen the messages. I'd seen her in that hotel parking lot, wrapped around Marcus with that soft, secret smile she used to save for me. Yeah, I said finally. I'm sure. He nodded, scribbling something down. All right. I'll keep you updated. The drive home was quiet, the radio off, the city passing in a blur of headlights and rain-slick asphalt. When I finally pulled into the driveway, the house seemed darker than before, the windows blank and hollow. I sat in the car for a long time, forehead pressed to the steering wheel, eyes squeezed shut against the sting of tears. I hadn't cried since that night, hadn't let myself. Because if I started, I wasn't sure I'd be able to stop. Inside, I headed straight for the kitchen, pulled open the cabinet above the fridge, and grabbed the half-empty bottle of bourbon. Ella had always hated the smell of whiskey, had wrinkled her nose and made a face whenever I ordered it at restaurants. I poured a glass, downed it in one burning gulp, and poured another. 2 drinks in, my phone buzzed on the counter. I stared at the screen, pulse stuttering when Ella's name popped up. For a second, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, every nerve screaming at me to answer, to hear her voice, to pretend none of this had happened. But then I hit decline and switched the phone off, fingers trembling around the glass. She called again the next day. And the day after. She left voicemails, soft, teary apologies, promises to make things right. I didn't listen to any of them, just deleted them with numb fingers and dropped my phone in a drawer, out of sight. I couldn't listen. Because if I did, I might forgive her. But then, a week later, there was a knock at the door. I froze, halfway through peeling the plastic from a microwave dinner, and stared at the entryway, heart pounding.
Ella had a key, she wouldn't knock.
Maybe it was a neighbor, or Peter, or.
The knock came again, more insistent.
I set the tray down, wiped my palms on my jeans, and pulled open the door. And there she was, hair tangled and eyes rimmed red, a duffel bag slung over one shoulder. She looked awful, like she hadn't slept in days, makeup smeared, lips chapped. Her eyes flicked over me, lingering on the rumpled clothes and the empty bottles lining the kitchen counter.
Her face crumpled. "Alex," she breathed, voice shaking.
God, I didn't know where else to go. Please, just let me talk. Please.
I gripped the door tighter, the edges biting into my palm.
I should have slammed it in her face. Should have told her to get the hell off my porch and take her apologies with her. But I couldn't move, couldn't look away from the raw guilt in her eyes, the way her hands trembled around the strap of her bag. Talk, I said flatly, forcing my voice steady. She bit her lip, blinking fast, and looked down at her hands. I ended it, she whispered, words tumbling out in a rush. With Marcus. God, Alex, I am so sorry.
I don't know what I was thinking.
I was stupid and selfish, and I love you. I love you so much, and I'll do anything to fix this, I swear.
I laughed, harsh and hollow.
Fix this?
I echoed.
How the hell do you think you can fix this, Ella?
With what, an apology?
A couple's retreat? Jesus Christ. She flinched, eyes wet and wide. I know it's not that simple, but please.
We can try therapy, or.
Therapy?
I barked. You think I'm going to sit in some office and listen to you talk about how sorry you are while you fucked him behind my back for months?
Her breath hitched, tears slipping down her cheeks.
Please, she choked, voice cracking.
Please, Alex, I can't lose you.
I can't.
You already did, I cut in, voice ice cold.
The second you walked into that cabin, you lost me.
She crumbled, a sob tearing from her throat, knees giving out as she sank to the porch. Her hands pressed to her face, muffling the ragged cries, and I looked away, jaw clenched, chest aching. For a second, just a second, I almost reached for her. Almost pulled her into my arms, let her bury her face in my chest and say she was sorry over and over until it started to mean something. But then I saw Marcus's texts in my mind's eye, saw the hotel room, and the flicker of pity died. Leave, I said, voice flat. She hiccuped, shoulders shaking. Please. Leave, I repeated, slamming the door in her face. And then I slid down against it, head in my hands, and let the tears come. After slamming the door on Ella, I didn't move. I slid down to the floor, forehead pressed against the wood, chest heaving with breaths that tore at my throat. Outside, her sobs pierced the silence, muffled and broken, and every instinct screamed at me to open the door, to pull her in, to tell her we'd find a way through this. But I stayed where I was, fingers digging into the floor, the words you already did echoing in my head until they were all I could hear. Eventually, her cries faded. I heard the shuffle of footsteps, the soft scrape of her duffel dragging across the porch, and then the sound of her car door slamming. The engine sputtered to life, headlights flashed through the curtains, and then she was gone, taillights bleeding red into the dark.
And I was alone.
The silence that settled after was deafening. I couldn't remember the last time the house had been this quiet. No music from Ella's studio, no soft humming as she cooked dinner, no laughter echoing down the hallway. Just the tick of the kitchen clock and the faint hum of the fridge, and the ragged sound of my own breathing. I staggered to my feet, limbs heavy and clumsy, and stumbled into the kitchen. Grabbed the nearest bottle and twisted off the cap, the burn of whiskey scorching a path down my throat.
It didn't help. Just left me lightheaded and sick, hands trembling too hard to set the glass down without it clattering against the counter. I squeezed my eyes shut, sucked in a breath, and let it out slow. But all I could see was Ella, her eyes rimmed red, hands shaking, voice breaking with "I can't lose you." I dragged a hand down my face, bit down hard on the inside of my cheek, and sank into one of the kitchen chairs, head in my hands. I didn't sleep that night. Didn't even try. Just sat there in the dark with the bottle and my phone, scrolling aimlessly, fingers twitching with the urge to call her, to hear her voice one more time. To ask her how the hell we got here, and if it was my fault, and why I wasn't enough. I was still there when the sun crawled up over the horizon, pale light spilling through the blinds, painting stripes across the kitchen floor. My eyes burned, head pounding with dehydration and grief and something that felt like fury. My phone buzzed, the sound sharp and shrill in the silence. I flinched, fingers fumbling as I snatched it off the table, pulse stuttering when I saw Ella's name on the screen. I hesitated for half a second, thumb hovering over the answer button, before I squeezed my eyes shut and let it go to voicemail. She called twice more that day. Then once the next. And then nothing. A week passed before I heard from her again, this time through Peter. He called late in the afternoon, voice brisk and businesslike, to let me know Ella had received the divorce papers. She wants to meet, he said. Neutral ground. No lawyers. She says she just wants to talk. My first instinct was to say no. To tell him to handle it, to cut her out completely, to make this as clean and quick as possible. But the thought of her sitting alone in some cafe, waiting, eyes red and hands twisting in her lap, God, I was weak. Fine, I muttered, pinching the bridge of my nose. Yeah. Fine. We agreed to meet at the diner by the pier, the one we used to go to after late-night movies, splitting fries and milkshakes and stealing kisses in the back booth. I almost told Peter to change the location, somewhere new, somewhere that wasn't drenched in memories, but I bit my tongue. I got there first. Slid into the booth by the window, ordered coffee I didn't want, and stared out at the boardwalk, at couples strolling hand in hand, at kids with sticky fingers and sunburned cheeks. My knee bounced beneath the table, fingers tapping out a rhythm against the chipped ceramic mug. When Ella finally walked in, my breath caught. She looked awful. Paler than I'd ever seen her, eyes ringed with dark shadows, shoulders hunched beneath a gray hoodie I didn't recognize. She paused by the door, scanning the diner with nervous, jerky movements, and when her eyes found mine, she flinched. She made her way over slowly, one hand clutching the strap of her purse, eyes darting everywhere but my face. She slid into the seat across from me, bit her lip, and twisted her hands together on the table. "Hi," she whispered. I didn't respond. Just took a slow sip of coffee, the bitterness coating my tongue. She exhaled shakily, hands wringing together. I got the papers," she said, voice raw. I wanted to talk first. To explain. Explain what? I asked, tone flat. That you fucked him because I worked late? That you lied to me for months because you were lonely? She flinched, eyes glistening, and looked down at her hands. It wasn't, I didn't mean for it to happen. I was so tired of feeling alone, and Marcus, her voice cracked, and she pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. I never stopped loving you, Alex. I swear to God, I never stopped. I laughed, cold and sharp. Bullshit. She flinched again, shoulders curling in. Please, she choked. Please, I need you to know that I'm sorry. That I'll do anything to fix this. I'll go to therapy, I'll quit photography, I'll block his number, I'll do anything. Please don't do this. Please don't leave me. The desperation in her voice was a knife between my ribs, twisting slow and cruel. But all I could see was that cabin, that hotel parking lot, that smug grin on Marcus's face. You already did, I said, each word clipped and venomous. You left the second you walked into his bed. She crumbled, hands flying to cover her face, sobs muffled and broken. I looked away, jaw clenched, nails biting into my palms hard enough to draw blood. After a moment, she dragged in a shuddering breath, hands falling to her lap, eyes rimmed red. Is that it? She whispered, voice small. We're just over? Yeah, I said, voice flat. We're over. Her face crumpled, shoulders curling in, and I forced myself to stand, to turn away from her shattered expression and the tears streaking down her cheeks. I made it halfway to the door before her voice stopped me, small and broken and raw. I'm sorry, she whispered, voice cracking. God, I'm so sorry. I didn't look back. Didn't trust myself to. Just shoved through the door, out into the salt-stung air, eyes stinging, heart splintered to pieces.
And as I walked away, the waves crashing against the pier, the sun dipping behind the horizon, I wondered if I'd ever stop bleeding.